Hello, my name is Juliet Kavishe, and today I will be speaking about African iconography and how it can influence us as designers. But I'll also speak to South American writing systems and Asian writing systems, and how those icons or writing systems, symbols, have been used in modern day design successfully, and maybe we as designers need to tap into that to create more successful or more appreciative contextual designs. So what is a writing system? It's a method of recording and communicating information that is understandable by others. If you have your own unique writing system, the other person who isn't informed of this won't be able to translate or read it, or won't be able to understand what is being recorded or communicated. There are various types of writing systems, and I will be speaking to syllabary, which is more alphanumeric, what we would call alphanumeric today, where it's actual letters that are strung together to create words that are further strung together to create a sentence. The other writing system is proto-writing, and we commonly know it as hieroglyphics, where it's not a definite linguistic interpretation, but symbols and icons are used to define a statement, a proverb, a metaphor, and those who are privy to the science or the mystery of these icons are the only ones who'd be able to understand the information relayed. Saki Mafundikwa, in his 2013 TED Talk, speaks of us as designers using African writing systems, a visual language that's based on the African creative heritage, to possibly influence or inspire our designs. One of the most popular writing systems in Southern Africa is the Ndebele writing system. It is more of proto-writing and leaning towards symbols, where an icon doesn't necessarily translate into a letter, but an actual phrase or a word. The colors and the meanings of the colors have a dual meaning. And this is also seen in how their patterns mirror each other. There is a sense of duality and mirroring in all the works that they do. And the artist Esther Mahlangu boldly illustrates this in her artwork. The colors that the Ndebele symbols use have a duality in meaning. And you'll notice that even in their patterns, they mirror each other or mimic each other, even though the colors might be different. The duality in the pattern and the meanings of colors have a huge impact in what the symbols mean. For example, black can mean marriage and rebirth, and white can mean spiritual purity and love, whereas yellow means wealth and happiness. The product designer, Siyanda Mbele, also uses Ndebele symbology and Zulu letters in his product design. You can also see the mimic and the mirroring of the colors in his products and the patterns in his products. Again, a great example of how symbols can be used to influence us as designers in a very successful way. The French muralist Camilla Walala also cites that Ndebele traditions and the Ndebele traditional patterns also influence her as a designer and an artist. Her artworks can be found all over Europe, especially in London, and the bold colors and the use of basic geometry and simple sacred geometry in her work herald back to the Ndebele symbols. Moving slightly north, where we find the Abakwa writing system, which can be found in Angola, Congo, and Nigeria, which I found to be quite fascinating that it traveled up Central Africa onto the West African shores, which maybe speaks to trade amongst the nations of the time. The Abakwa writing system, in its essence, might look like a huge bird or like a kite, but each element in that writing system is a word and a symbol. And I imagine that these strung together creates a paragraph, a song, a sentence. Staying in Central and West Africa, specifically Cameroon and Nigeria, is the Nsibi writing system. This is more of a symbology writing system, more like proto-writing, where each symbol and icon refers to a word, like congress or meeting or drinking. However rudimentary in their interpretation and however direct in the interpretation that even to date we would understand it, there was a level of mystery behind it. This writing system is over 1,000 years old and can still be found today. And I'd like to imagine how one would then illustrate, can we meet for a drink in this way? 125 years ago, King Ibrahim of the Bamum Kingdom created a writing system specifically for his kingdom. Yes, this is in Cameroon, and in contrast to the Nsibi writing system, which could also be found in Cameroon, this is more of a syllabary as opposed to icon type of writing system. The beautiful curves that can be found in it speak to a more organic and fluid way of writing that the king embodied. And this writing system, though of the same region, is 900 years apart and maybe speaks to how language develops, how writing systems can develop from something quite symbolic and iconographic to something a little bit more scripted and something we can translate into something more alphanumeric. One of my favorite writing systems was discovered in 1952 by Frederic Bobret. He was visiting Bete County in Côte d'Ivoire, and he found these etchings on stone, and the people in the county believed that these etchings had spiritual meaning. Out of curiosity, he went and did further research and came up with this beautiful discovery of this amazing writing system. Now, some of the symbols are vividly associated with what we would know as ablution identification, what we would identify as man or woman, or man dancing, or lifting something up off the ground. But it's the beautiful basic nature of these symbols that are quite elegant that have me completely fascinated. In the same breath, these symbols illustrate a word in as much as a letter. Because of the elegance and maybe the true nature of these symbols, I would imagine if I was doing a project in Côte d'Ivoire, taking these simple symbols and superimposing a grid system on them to come up with a beautiful jewelry design, maybe the plan of a house or an office. And I think maybe as designers, or not even think, I suggest or I believe that this should be the way forward, taking something as ancient and beautiful and elegant as this and translating it maybe vertically or horizontal into successful design. One of the more popular writing systems on the African continent, aside from the Ndebele one, is the Ndikwa writing system of the Akan people. The Akan people can be found in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, and this writing system leans towards symbology. These symbols could be metaphors, phrases that could be used in our everyday lives. My favorite symbol is the Sankofa symbol, which reminds us to maybe look to our past in order to create a brighter future. And this talk is just generally about that. How can we tap into our ancient knowledge systems, our indigenous knowledge systems, and use them to create more enriching designs? David Adger cites that unity, harmony, and spirituality were the three tenets that were used or were repetitive as thoughts as they were designing what is unity, what is harmony, what is spirituality, and how is it represented. So I went back and I looked at the Ndikwa symbols for these three ideas, and I looked at the plans and the elevations and the sections, and you can clearly see how the symbol of unity has been used to do the landscape outside of the cathedral. Maybe the section of the building speaks to spirituality and harmony. And you can see that this particular architect leaned heavily into the ancient knowledge systems of the people and the Ndikwa writing systems to create beautiful and successful design in the region. The textile designer, Krista Amwa, is of Ghanaian British heritage, and she did a beautiful textile collaboration with Burnout Design this year. She cites using Ndikwa symbols in her work and using her Ghanaian heritage in some of her product design influences, in her textile design, and in her upholstery design. You can see this in the patterns, you can see this in the motifs that she uses consistently in her textiles. And this is another successful illustration of tapping into indigenous knowledge systems to create beautiful products for everyday use. The Bambara people of Senegal have a beautiful writing system called the Bambara writing system. And they have this beautiful tale of how they got to be self-sustaining. They cite this magical antelope, which they refer to as Chihuahua, passed them on their way, and with their big horns illustrated how to use those horns to till the earth, and in tilling the earth, planting seeds and harvesting. And that's how the Bambara people knew how to take care of themselves and become a farming community. The Chihuahua clothing brand then took this beautiful story of the antelope horns and created a beautiful logo, extracting the symbology of that from the ancient Bambara writing system, and it has translated into this beautiful logo that they use today. And now we will move to the South American writing systems. The one more popular writing system is the Mayan writing system, but there is a lesser known writing system that traveled from Liberia through slave trade and can be found in current day Brazil and in the West Indies. This writing system is called the Basava writing system. It is quite angular in its interpretation, with quite sharper circular curves. I imagine an architect like Oscar Niemeyer probably didn't tap into using an ancient writing system in his architecture and his interior designs. But when I look at how he was able to manipulate concrete in a certain way, and the use of these beautiful angular structures as support systems, as to the, in opposed to the typical columns that we would have seen by this time, I would maybe fantasize that he maybe did know inherently, maybe genetically, maybe in his DNA, he was privy to this indigenous knowledge system of the Basava writing system. This could just be wishful thinking on my part, but I would love to explore this further and see if there are any other architects who probably did this. The ancient Puerto writing system, the Mayan writing system, which can be found in Guatemala and other parts of South America, is one of the more popular ones. It can be seen in movies like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom or The Lost Skull as a more curvaceous writing system. It almost leans towards the cartoonish interpretation of symbols, but it's quite beautiful and elegant in how it was carved onto the buildings that have been done by the ancient Mayans. The more popular writing system actually mimics, in terms of its icons, they mimic the architecture. And one would then care to imagine that, did the writing system come first, and then the architecture of these ladders or these steps leading up a high temple? Or did the temple come first, and the representation of this temple in this Mayan script was then something quite square with these steps leading upwards? The architects Picault and Godfrey did this beautiful building in Mexico City, and they cite using Mayan script and Mayan symbology in the idea of having these steps form part of the architecture and the interiors. The use of concrete in its brutal form and the use of wood to bring warmth and contrast into their building is beautifully illustrated in contrast to the Mayan symbols. I can easily see that these two particular symbols were used to influence this particular design. The name of this building is Casa Merida, and yes, it might appear brutalistic in its interpretation and use and materiality, but the quick identification of the symbol of ascension to heaven that the Mayans have, and it illustrating the temples that they worshipped in, can be seen in the steps leading down into the courtyards or leading out of the building. And I think this is a beautiful interpretation of an indigenous knowledge system being applicable in contemporary architecture and design. Last but not least is the Asian writing systems. We know beautiful ways in which the Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese have illustrated their words through calligraphy that has traveled through ancient knowledge and ancient oral history and written history and can still be found today. One of the ancient writing systems is by the Shang dynasty, which can be found in China today. This writing system could be found on the back of tortoise shells and also in ancient bones. And it was a simplistic interpretation of ideas like the trickling down of rain, the symbol of a dragon. But these symbols have later translated into modern day Chinese, Japanese, and Korean writing systems. And I think it's beautiful that this ancient knowledge has been maintained and the idea of this knowledge and writing system is interpreted into something quite modern. Another writing system that maybe traveled through the opium or poppy trade throughout Europe is the quatrefoil symbol. The quatrefoil symbol is ancient and indigenous to the Asian region, but can now be found on cathedrals and also in the more popular brand, the Louis Vuitton brand. That symbol is heralding back to an ancient Asian writing system. For the 2020 Shanghai World Expo, the Korean pavilion actually used type. They used letters, they used symbols to create the facades and beautiful pavilion that would be displayed on that day in Shanghai. You can see how they deconstructed these letters to place them on this box and created these facade designs and then created this repetitive pattern. And the beautiful translation of this with color and materiality added a level of depth and intrigue into their more successful pavilion that year. Again, tapping into the idea that something which we consider every day, we do it every day by writing or typing, maybe that could then be used to influence us as designers and architects. When was the last time you looked at your handwriting and thought, this could then become a logo, or this could become a script as part of a fabric design, or a pattern on a fabric, or maybe even the idea of it being a plan of a building? Maybe we need to tap into that which is inherently ours, that which is inherently personal, and use that to influence our designs going forward. The Andikra symbol Sankofa is one of my favorite symbols for this very reason, because it reminds us to tap into our past in order to create a successful or more enriching future. Tapping into our past to inform our future is maybe what we can do as designers, seeking another way of finding inspiration in our designs, but seeking something a little bit more deeper and intrinsic. Writing systems, language, it translates all barriers. If I'm not able to speak your language, but I've been commissioned to design work for you, I can then maybe look into your culture and look into the ancient writing systems of your culture, and we can maybe find a common ground. As a designer, I would believe that I'm more successful if I'm serving you, my client, better. And hopefully, as designers, we can look to these ancient writing systems as an idea or a concept or a launching pad for our designs going forward. Thank you.